What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
Welcome back. This is America Trends, and this is one you're going to want to stay here for. John Krosick and Larry Rifkin. And John, I want to say this to you, really, just at the beginning, before we get going here. A lot of people are saying...
Yeah? What are they saying?
They're saying you should be listening to America Trends more and more and more.
Absolutely. You got to binge it.
Yeah, you got to binge listen as opposed to binge watching. No, this is the title of a new book. A lot of people are saying, and the subtitle is called The New Conspiracism and the Assault on Democracy. And in the old days, the good old days, John, you had some really good conspiracy theories.
You did.
And they all made some sense. That's why a lot of people latched onto them. But today, there's a new conspiracism without any theory. The theory is gone. It's just meant to drag somebody down into the mud. So even that has denigrated in our society today, unfortunately. And of course, where does that statement, a lot of people are saying, come from? It comes from our own illustrious president when he'll say that. Oh, well, a lot of people are saying, and you say, who? And why should I even listen to them? They're making no sense either, Mr. President.
I think generally most people have very little trust in our government right now, whether it's the president or Congress or Senate. So I think that's why we've kind of lost the theory in conspiracy theory, because we don't trust anything they're saying.
Exactly. So you can say just about anything. And that's the problem. You can literally say anything, and you don't have to prove it. You don't have to back it up. You just have to say, well, other people are saying it, or it's on the internet, or I found a story that really was manufactured just to get my attention.
Worst.
Exactly.
Because once something is on the internet,
well,
it's there for life.
Untruth and truth both can travel at the speed of the internet now. And now that we're going to 5G, which we reported on several weeks back, and that's a fascinating one to go back and listen to, it's going to go at 100 times faster pace. And what was it? Was it Mark Twain who said that, a lie can travel around the world while the truth is still getting its sneakers on?
Yeah,
or were there sneakers back in the day of Mark Twain? I don't know.
He must have had some sneakers.
I know. He must have had sneakers.
He had to run to keep people from catching him.
Well, Russell Muirhead is joining us. He, along with Nancy Rosenblum, wrote this book, a lot of people are saying, and he calls Donald Trump the conspiracist in chief, just as he's railing against what he sees as a conspiracy, a takedown by the mainstream media. He's also taking down everyone else in the process. And I've got to tell you, in America, in many ways, I know that there's one presidential candidate who says, and I think it's really interesting, he says, change the channel. We're tired of this show, and we're not getting anything done. And I really understand his exhaustion. You and I have talked about exhaustion. But when I think about how serious politics can be, and in America, for me, for many years, it was a parlor game because everything was going pretty well. And whether the government was left, right, center, good, bad, or otherwise, we went on. America went on. And it seemed as if nothing could derail us and our success. But now I begin to question. I see where our economy is no longer the most efficient in the world. People aren't looking at us with great veneration the way they used to, saying, oh, America, they're the shining light anymore. And I'll tell you, I'm watching this series on HBO called Chernobyl. And, John, it reminds me.
Well, those were the Russians, though.
Well, the Russians, yeah. Well, those were the Soviets, John. They're even worse than the Russians. But when you see how much truth was denied, right, and even scientists ignored because it didn't fit the dogma of the state you realize how serious politics can be. And in that case, they were trying to deny that Chernobyl even happened.
Right.
Oh, no, we can't show weakness. We can't show that our technology is of an inferior brand than America. We can't show the world that. So as much as you want people to leave a certain radius, we're not going to allow them to leave because we're going to deny that it actually occurred in the way that it did. And we're going to use one of these home dosimeters to prove that it's not that bad until you brought in the industrial strength one that showed that the radiation was enough to kill people for the next 15,000 years. I mean, it's incredible. Yeah. And until that radiation went over to Scandinavia, these liars in power were trying to deny it. That's what politics can mean.
Yeah, that's scary.
It really is.
It's scary that they can lie to us like that, but and we are really kind of at that state here. We feel that our politicians are lying to us, and so many times, they say one thing and do another, and I don't know how we can get that back. Really, that trust back in our system.
And we used to believe, John, when we used to solve problems, when we used to take a man on the moon, when we used to do things that we felt so proud of as Americans, we said, this government, I mean, the trust in government used to be tremendous when you go back to the earlier times. And we used to win wars. We used to do things that today seem almost impossible. Well, let's look at this assault on truth and these conspiracies and how they rise up and how we deflect them over time. And again, fascinating new look at this subject of conspiracy theories. A lot of people are saying today on America Trends. With us on the line is Russell Muirhead, and he's a professor at Dartmouth College, and he wrote the book A Lot of People Are Saying with Nancy Rosenblum, and she is a professor at Harvard University. And when I saw the book originally, it was sent to me, and I just looked at the title, Russell, and I just said, what does this mean? A lot of people are saying. And then I read the subtitle, The New Conspiracism and the Assault on Democracy. But you're quoting, really, our own president, because he often says...
It's sort of a signature phrase by President Trump. That's right.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying. Well, what is he saying when he says a lot of people are saying?
It's an interesting way of sort of repeating an innuendo rather than taking responsibility for the statement that, George Soros is funding a caravan of, refugees heading for the U.S. border. You just say, a lot of people are saying it. I'm not saying it, but a lot of people are saying it, which sort of makes it true enough to put out there, maybe even true enough to believe. And it's a very low standard. It's a low standard for giving over your belief to a particular proposition. But that's the standard that's at work now in the new conspiracism.
Well, I love the fact that you talk about the history of conspiracy theories, and yet you say, at least with the old conspiracy theories, there was some theory there. And it was put out there for a reason, and it was meant really to help illuminate something that might have been shadowy or dark or mysterious. Today, what really is this new conspiracism?
You put it so well, and you really crystallized there the central question that Nancy and I were trying to answer. We were trying to answer it, first of all, just for ourselves because it confused us. And you're right. Conspiracy theory starts with a problem. It starts with a question that people want to see answered. For instance, who killed JFK? It doesn't seem that one lone gunman could succeed at killing the most protected person on the planet. Or why did we invade Iraq? It's an interesting question. My wife and I still ask it of each other sometimes. Why did we invade Iraq? And the official answer is WMDs. We thought Saddam Hussein had WMDs. The conspiracy theory says, no, it was the oil. Dick Cheney wanted to get their oil, and that makes more sense of why the United States might send hundreds of thousands of soldiers into a place that wasn't ostensibly threatening it. So it starts out with a problem. Sometimes there's a disproportion between the cause and the effect. 19 people plotting in Afghanistan succeed at attacking the Pentagon and destroying the World Trade Centers. That doesn't seem plausible. It starts to feel more plausible if you say, as the conspiracy theory does, the U.S. government was part of the plan, knew about it in advance, helped plan it, something like that. So conspiracy theory does try to make sense of a world that often doesn't make sense or is hard to understand. The new stuff, the new conspiracism, like, say, Pizzagate, Hillary Clinton and her campaign chairman are alleged to be running an international child sex trafficking ring out of a pizzeria in, Chevy Chase or Washington, D.C. And it's not clear do people hear kids screaming? Is there something that people are wondering about? What does this explain? It seems so preposterous, so strange, so made up that it doesn't really render the world more understandable. It kind of renders it more wacky and mysterious. And it even gets weirder than that when you look at something like QAnon, this kind of mashup conspiracy theory that involves a secret plan to arrest Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and George Soros, probably, and lots of other liberals. Kind of mixes it up with the idea that JFK Jr. will rise from the dead and return. I don't know exactly why. It's fabulation piled on fabulation until finally you have this concoction rather than a theory.
Well, if now, today, the new conspiracism isn't really meant to explain something, as the theories were, then you say its sole purpose is to delegitimize, to deny someone standing, to argue, explain, or persuade. You just want to throw something like a stink bomb in the middle of something and run from it. And you use one word, rigged, or something that doesn't really get at any thoughtful presentation, even if it is a fabrication.
Yeah, that's right. It functions to sort of, really, one of the things that it delegitimates is the idea that in politics, we're up against opponents who maybe we think are mistaken, get a lot of things wrong, but who are good faith fellow citizens, participants in political life. And so you could say that the first thing about democracy is the idea that an opposition is legitimate. If you don't believe it's legitimate to have an opposition, then welcome to the world of authoritarianism and tyranny. So to be Democrats, even let's say you are say you're a Republican. To be a good, real Democrat, you have to look at the opponents and say, okay, I can't imagine voting Democratic, but I understand that my Democratic fellow citizens are acting in good faith. They believe in the country too. The new conspiracism kind of undermines that. It undermines the legitimacy of the opposition. It makes the opposition look criminal, treasonous, like an existential threat to the fundamentals of the country. And that's what that sort of one-word conspiracy theory rigged does. It's not clear what it explains. Was the election rigged? It's kind of odd for the president to say that. He
won.
Elected. Yeah, he won. What's he so upset about? Everybody agrees he won. No.
But then he was upset that anybody thought that something from the outside intervened to help him in that process. So delegitimate any of those arguments that, wait a minute, you were asking for certain help that actually came, and now you're trying to push it away. But what I found really fascinating is you say what validates these new conspiracy approaches is not evidence. So let's look at the past where people really did try to weave a real fanciful story, but simply repetition. If you say it often enough with enough emphasis or emphasis and intent, and if you're really effective at it, and let's be honest about it, Donald Trump has an incredible way. When he came out the other day after the Mueller report and said it was a takedown, and they failed. It was just a takedown, and that's it. Okay, goodbye, walk away, and claim that now that's the mantra that you'll be using for the next year.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a very corrosive phenomenon, and it's facilitated by new communications technology that allows people to repeat, to like things, to forward things, to retweet, to get something out there and repeat it 100,000 times is not very difficult with the new communications technology, and that's the way in which repetition is now displacing evidence, the old form of validation. It used to be that if you wanted to get something into I don't know, on CBS News, on very valuable airtime or radio time, or get it into the newspaper, you had to show that it was true or show that it could be validated with evidence. You had to convince an editor or producer. The new communications technology, which is very exciting and liberating and interesting, also allows for rapid repetition of falsehood. And now things that get repeated start, no matter how false they are, start to have the ring of, validity just because a lot of people are saying them. So that's a fundamental feature of the new conspiracism. And that's something, we didn't really see this even 10 years ago in American politics. And I think we're going to see it all over the world soon. It's something we're seeing here now. We're not seeing it so much in Europe yet. But I think this technology is going to really disrupt politics all over.
Oh, absolutely. You call Donald Trump the conspiracist in chief. Just as he's railing against what he sees as a conspiracy, the takedown by the mainstream media or the intelligence agencies in the Mueller probe, how does the American public sift through all of this? Because when we used to think about misinformation coming from official sources, like the president, that was considered propaganda of some sort, that they're trying to convince and cajole, but they're usually doing it with fact. When you've got many of the conspiracies, starting with what he said about Barack Obama, which really got him into politics in many ways, as whether he was born in the United States. I mean, what does that do to turn the whole notion of conspiracy and government and secrecy on its head when it's coming from the chief of the entire nation?
It's really quite amazing. It's really quite amazing to see a president of the United States give himself over to this kind of new conspiracism so thoroughly. And yeah, that was how he broke into in American national politics, by reviving and spreading the birther conspiracy. That President Obama was actually an illegitimate president, foisted on the country by those whose loyalties are to outside, other regimes. And it's quite disorienting, of course, to have a president with all the authority of the executive branch of the national government behind him utter and validate and underline this panoply of very odd conspiratorial notions, from the birther conspiracy to QAnon to the rigged election, that elected him. And I think it's, when I say disorienting, I mean it can really, even if you have sympathy for President Trump, it makes it very difficult to keep your finger on what's really reliable, what's likely to be true, and what's completely fictitious. And ultimately, I think what the new conspiracism attempts to do is, remake reality, claim the authority of reality, and undermine our common sense. And when our common sense is attacked, it can be quite disorienting. And that's what I think, presidential conspiracism does. It may be limited. This may be the only conspiracist who's elected to the presidency. It may, for a long, long time. There's something about, I guess, Donald Trump's mindset that causes him to almost instinctively gravitate to the conspiratorial understanding of things.
But what happens when someone like him as president, and of course, this investigation that many people now can say perhaps started with Lindsey Graham to John McCain to the dossier, whatever. But, when he calls it a witch hunt about 200 times, until it basically, until we see the whole thing, clears him, when is the legitimacy of Donald Trump, the conspiracist in chief, become the issue, even to adherents? I mean, he kept telling them it was a witch hunt, and now he's saying that, by all accounts, what he can tell, Bob Mueller is an honorable man. I mean, when does that begin to really befuddle even those who want to support him?
Yeah, I mean, that's right. Having really attacked the normal kind of processes of government that are the way they are because they support the rule of law. The process by which, a very delicate process, a very tricky process by which the executive office, the Justice Department, investigates the head of the executive branch, the president. Not an easy thing to do. And so it requires this kind of special office, a special prosecutor who acts with great restraint and according to the highest standards of professionalism. It's, this is the sort of thing that Trump was attacking in a self-serving and partisan way right up until he realized that it would serve him to believe in the process.
Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. Let me turn this around. Yeah.
I really think that the corrupting effect of this is that his most loyal supporters aren't now going to think, oh, I guess there was a process by which the rule of law could be upheld. I guess the process really did work. What they're going to do is reinterpret every actor in the process in partisan terms. Is he or she with us or against us? And if they're with us, then we believe in them. And if they're against us, then we lock them up. And that kind of approach is very corrosive, of course, to justice, the rule of law.
Is the true danger when conspiracists turn the vitriol on these institutions beyond even personalities, thus the concern about the foundations of our very democracy? So we're talking about political parties, we're talking about legitimate opposition, we're talking about those institutions that actually try to derive fact so we can have good political debate based on fact, or universities or the media. In other words, all those things that are so fundamental to the society that is clear thinking and moving forward based upon certain precepts.
Yeah, that's just what Nancy and I see the new conspiracism corroding. One is what we think of as knowledge-producing institutions, which are agencies or even non-governmental entities like universities or courts, you could even say, that are basically about illuminating elemental facts. So there are, agencies that have to do with the weather, that say things about the climate, or the Center for Disease Control that says things about vaccines, and they're really scientific at their core. The kinds of facts that they isolate and disseminate are fundamental to good, practical, effective decision making, and they're needed. Whether you're a conservative or a liberal or some mix of the two, doesn't really matter what your ideology is. You need good facts to make good decisions. And the new conspiracism undermines the authority of all these institutions and causes people to ask the partisan question, not whether they're right or wrong, but are they with you, are they with me or against me? And once they lose all their authority, facts themselves start to not just lose their authority, but lose their place in political discussion. That's why we sort of say that the new conspiracism doesn't serve some, conservative. It's coming from the right today more than from the left. It'll eventually come from the left too, I think. And ultimately, it doesn't serve any one side, because ultimately it kind of just makes actual debate, real disagreement, impossible without any access to a terrain of reality, of factuality. We can't argue. We can't debate. All we can do is, at best, scream at each other. At worst, take up violence.
A lot of people are saying the new conspiracism and the assault on democracy. Russell Muirhead is with us. He wrote this book with Nancy Rosenblum. And when you look at it, a lot of people might say that, the reason that we're undermining expertise is look what the experts gave us. 9/11, we don't know how that happened. Why weren't we protected? The Iraq War in response to that, the financial collapse. So people say, if the experts can't get any of these things right, why don't we just kind of, rail at them and then create our own new reality? And of course, you've got somebody who's very good at this. I mean, there's no question. Donald Trump, if he wasn't the communicator that he is and the ability that he has to put very difficult ideas together, bad trade deals, they were stupid. I mean, without getting into any level of detail, he's very good at debunking a lot of things without offering a real alternative. But, did the experts give a big opening here in America to someone like him?
I happen to agree with that characterization completely. And I think the two things you point to, which are not just 9/11, but really the response to 9/11, because what we said after 9/11, what the leadership class said, was that we should invade Iraq. And this came mainly, of course, from the George W. Bush administration, from his appointees, but also from many people on the left, even the human rights left. And we were told 6 days, 6 weeks, not going to be 6 months. This is going to be an easy errand. Well, we're still there more than 16 years later, and it's still it's a catastrophe with hundreds of thousands of people dead and trillions of dollars in the U.S. Treasury, all on the credit card spent. So yeah, I think you're right. It's a perfectly reasonable response to lose confidence in political elites and in certain forms of expertise or the authority of expertise in foreign policy. I think that's reasonable. And you could tell a similar story about the financial crisis. We followed all the wise guys. We did what Rubin wanted to do, what Larry Summers wanted to do. We deregulated. We did what Greenspan wanted to do. And what did it give us? Greatest financial crisis since the Great Depression, when the very people who caused the crisis put a gun to the head of the taxpayers and said, "Bail us out, or we'll take everybody down." And that is morally odious. And so I think the right response, of course, is skepticism about expertise. Questioning, vigorous questioning, and vigilant skepticism. This sort of response that undermines the very possibility of knowledge by attacking its building blocks, facticity, facts. This is going to be far, far worse than the original problem, which is experts who overstate what they know.
Now you tell us, and I want to quote from the book because I found this very compelling. What happens with this new conspiracism? It unsettles the ground on which we argue, negotiate, compromise, and even disagree. Ultimately, it makes democracy unworkable and makes democracy seem unworthy. Wow. I mean, we really don't want a takedown, as the president talks about, a takedown of the entire democracy, because then what do we end up with? Because there's really no alternative baked in to all this anger, frustration, and populism. There's almost nihilism. I mean, what replaces it?
Yeah, that's another. I mean, when we look back at earlier kinds of conspiracy theory, we notice that it's often motivated by some comprehensive understanding or some understanding of an alternative, a politics without lies, or a politics that's cleansed of some sort of corruption. So it attacks, it tries to expose and unmask the secret and corrupt uses of power for the sake of reform and improvement. And the new conspiracism, by contrast, which undermines all authority indiscriminately, which delegitimates political opponents, whether they're opponents coming from the right or from the left, which delegitimates knowledge-producing institutions of all kinds. This new conspiracism is much more corrosive, and it's not going to cause a revolution or something dramatic or some instantaneous crisis that threatens democracy. We worry that what we call delegitimation is something that happens just little by little, like the water draining out of a bathtub. You don't even notice the level going down, but eventually it's gone. And that people's belief in their own regime, democracy, is a kind of government that can effectively serve what we might call the common good, drains away until the final little bits of it are ringing around the drain and disappear. That's delegitimation. That's the kind of threat we see with this phenomenon. Something a little bit more slow, a little bit less dramatic, but ultimately really worrisome.
When we look at the way Donald Trump talks about things that he believes or sees or a lot of people are saying, I mean, he's not just looking at the left. He's not just looking at Democrats. I mean, he's going after the classic Republicans, and so many of them, the George Wills, the Bill Kristols, what is his name, Brett Stevens. So many of them have said, I'm a never Trumper because of this. So the normal debate between Democrats and Republicans has been sublimated, and he has risen to really control the entire debate and dialogue in America. I mean, it's a pretty remarkable act. I've got to say that. But what it leaves, what it leaves us with, I don't know.
When you say what it leaves us with, I mean, I think the real question is, what can we do about it? And it's the first thing I think we need to do is really understand what's going on. I think this is bigger than Trump. It's connected, as I said, to the new communications technology, and it's connected to a hyperbolic distrust of all institutions. I mean, here's a good example of how, conspiracists on the right distrust institutions, even institutions which the right has generally admired. Before Donald Trump, there was a conspiracy theory that got going via Alex Jones, the talk show host, the notorious talk show host from Austin, which said that the military was planning to create martial law in the state of Texas and disarm the population, take people's guns, and bring an end to freedom. That the United States Army was planning to do this. This conspiracy theory is called Jade Helm.
That wasn't true?
And
I'm kidding. Go on.
I'm here to disabuse you of that.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, so it was curious to see. They're not even Republicans, but conspiracists from the right view the United States Army, this institution that's been a repository of real admiration and trust from Republicans and conservatives for decades. After Vietnam, when the Democratic Party looked on the military with a little bit less admiration, the Republicans maintained theirs. It was very surprising, and so this phenomenon is not ideological. This is not about conservatism. This is about something much more much more corrosive and much more threatening to all institutions, including those that conservatives generally like. So the real question, as I say, is what can we do about it? And the first thing besides diagnosing it, describing it so we know what we're up against, and we know what the consequences of this can be, the first thing is to really, hold on to your common sense. Root your understandings in what you can see, what you can validate, what there's reason to believe, and to maintain a skeptical posture. The new conspiracism depends on the absence of skepticism. You can only believe Pizzagate if your basic critical faculties have been put on layaway, at least temporarily. And so the very thing that we should have as a consequence of the failure of elites, say in the Iraq invasion or in the financial crisis, is a thing we need to sustain in order to meet the new conspiracism.
You say that reversing the damage that may be had now in the democracy overall as a result of all this is re-legitimation. And I recall the Secretary of Labor many years ago, Donovan, after he was cleared, and he said, where do I go to get my reputation back? What window is that? So how do we begin to reclaim, because there's still so much vitriol, so much distrust, so much polarization. Where do we go to get back to the center of American politics to say, hey, some things really still do work around here, and we've got to hold on to those things preciously, like the rule of law, like justice. I mean, where do we go to get it back?
Yeah, we really think, Nancy and I really think that the process of democracy is a thing that's kind of hard to understand. I mean, I encounter students who think, the president can fix a traffic ticket. And the real misunderstanding there is a basic misunderstanding of federalism. That the President of the United States, for all the power the president has, can't really reach down, into a particular county in which you just got a traffic ticket and do anything about it. And so it's important to understand, I think, the basic processes of democratic decision making. And re-legitimation means explaining those processes. We need people in government explaining what's going on, why they're not just doing what they're doing in order to serve their side, their partisan, their party, their ideology, but why they're doing what they're doing in order to uphold a certain kind of fair process. And that, it sounds like a civics class, maybe not the most exciting one, but that kind of enacting democracy, explaining democracy, is absolutely necessary today. It might not have been so necessary 20 years ago. And that's what we think of as really essential to what we think, to what we call re-legitimation. But yeah, you're right. It's hard to get your reputation back. It's a lot easier to destroy than it is to create.
And also, you point to the fact that we've got this social media, so a lie gets around the world before truth can put its pants on, or something like that, Twain said. But rather than making sense of what is around us, we want the next revelation. We're so salacious. We're so hungry because now the 24/7 news cycle, and it's all about entertainment. It's all about these angry minds. We want immediate gratification. So we're really not looking for that depth or that clarity or that understanding of separation of powers or whatever it may be. We're just looking for the next fix, which comes with something that titillates our senses. I mean, we are in that entertainment culture. I know there was a book, I think that was published about 1985, that said it's not going to be Orwellian what happens to us. It's really going to be about entertainment and entertaining ourselves to death, because we are entertained by the Trump presidency. There's no question about it.
Yeah, he really, I mean, I agree with you. I do not underestimate his capacities, as a communicator, as a leader of a movement, as a leader of a large group, and as a demagogue. He honed his ability to entertain through 14 seasons of ruthless competition.
And at the knee of Roy Cohn.
In The Apprentice.
Yeah.
And he read those ratings every week and figured out what it was necessary, what he had to do to keep people's attention. It's an incredible skill. And yeah, he knows how to feed the beast, where the beast is not just our desire for something new, for a new story, a new scandal, but also the desire of the 24/7 news cycle. I mean, of the media to always have something new to be shocked about. So, yeah, he's working that. And maybe you're right. There are a few books out there that are talking, that are emphasizing how important it is to do things slowly, to read slowly. We always think speed reading is more efficient than reading, and to eat slowly, to think slowly. And maybe democratic citizens are going to have to cultivate part of maintaining a hold on your common sense and skepticism is to remember how to think slowly and not become captivated by this, very entertaining, shiny mobile that's turning, spinning above the crib.
Well, you say new conspiracism's characteristic forms are base assertions, ominous questions, innuendo that really leads people to say, I believe him, and therefore I want to know more. Why is that? I've always felt that there was something wrong there, and they lead you into all these dark corners. And you say it's permissive, very vague, and can envelop all manner of twisted thinking. And that's why a lot of people are saying, in a sense, evades ownership, but really opens up a wide window of suspicion that, again, we look through, and we may never find that anything is on the other side of that pane of glass, but we're still fascinated by it. And we've got somebody who's really capable of creating this imagery in a way that is pretty provocative, and certainly with the number of adherents that the president has, it's that shiny object as you talk about. But there may be something really nefarious about this whole process as we watch it unfold, and maybe we get tired of this reality game at some point. Maybe we just tire of it.
That's right. It could be. You're right. I think it could be very, very fatiguing. And you're right. That innuendo. It actually kind of it works on, it preys on our ideal of an open mind. So we sort of think, what it means to keep an open mind is that you entertain new possibilities, or new facts, even if they're bad or unwelcome, and you assess everything on its own merits. And so when somebody says, well, the Democrats plotted to create a clash in Charlottesville, they planned that. Leaders say, well, that I'm not saying that's true, but it's plausible, and that's the way that innuendo gets going. It's like if I can't be 100% certain that something's false, then it's plausible enough to repeat it and spread it. And I think that was actually Brian Zollinger, a congressman from Idaho, who, somebody asked him about whether the Democratic Party itself had lured white nationalists to Charlottesville to create a clash, said, well, I'm not saying it's true, but I am suggesting that it's completely plausible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in this environment, anything is. You know what I found very interesting, and we'll close with this, because people really need to read this book. I mean, I was taking copious notes. In the first, 10, 20 pages, I was fascinated by this distinction that you draw between classic conspiracy theories and the new conspiracism. And I really got it. And it is an important distinction. And you say that while there are many of the same forces at work, there are more dissimilarities than commonalities in the old theories versus the new conspiracism. Just reiterate that. I think it's really important for people to leave this conversation with that sensibility and that understanding.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the classic conspiracy theory really tries to make sense of the world. It tries to make power understandable and to unmask the secret uses of power, the secret exercises of power. So that we can all see what's going on. And sometimes it's paranoid, as Hofstadter famously said, but look, sometimes it's right. And so I think political conspiracy theory can be an incredibly important force in the world. The new conspiracism gives up on that great power and that promise of conspiracy theory. It doesn't try to make power readable and legible and understandable. It actually makes the exercise of power much, much more mysterious. It makes the whole political world more inscrutable and mysterious. All it makes sense of is that there are different sides fighting, my side and your side. Whatever's on my side is good. Whatever's on your side is rigged. And it replaces a politics of argument and discussion and debate with a politics of brute force.
Did you hear the one? Oh, never mind. Russell Muirhead, Nancy Rosenblum. The book is called, a lot of people are saying, The New Conspiracism and the Assault on Democracy. Thank you for shedding light on this topic in a way that I don't think anybody has really attempted to do that I've seen in this era when we're all scratching our heads. But thank you so much for being with us today on America Trends.
Oh, gosh, you're welcome. And thank you for a great conversation and for reading the book. Really appreciate it, Larry.
Absolutely. It was great. It really is. I really recommend it. And again, we'd love to have you back. Russell Muirhead today on America Trends. Thanks again.
Hey, Larry.
Yeah. What's up,
I
John?
got some exciting news for you.
Well, let's hear it.
We're part of the MHNR network.
And where can we find that?
That's mhnrnetwork.com.
I'm going there right now.
All right.